Dr. Chris here again. Thanks for joining me and listening to this. So today I have a topic that is just tremendously overdone for all sorts of reasons, okay? I'm gonna give you my brief take on things, okay? So this is the ketogenic diet, okay? I'm keto, you've heard that before. So ketogenic diet, it's very, very simple to eat a ketogenic diet, okay? At least as far as what makes it ketogenic and not. There's a tremendous difference in a well-designed ketogenic diet and a not well-designed ketogenic diet, okay? So what's a ketogenic diet? You know what ketones are? You gotta know what ketones are if you're gonna be in a ketogenic diet, okay? Your body, for the most part, runs off of glucose. That's sugar, right? You eat a carbohydrate, body breaks it down, turns into glucose in your bloodstream. Most of the time, your body uses that for energy, stores it as fat, and when we check your blood sugar, it's in a particular normal range, okay? Someone with diabetes or pre-diabetes, a few other disorders, they eat the sugar, the carbohydrate gets in the bloodstream, and your body can't handle it, and so you have elevated blood sugar longer than we expect you to in your bloodstream. All sorts of issues with that, but that's a different situation. With the ketogenic diet, you start running off of ketones instead of glucose. Where do ketones come from? Ketones come from fat cells, okay? When adipose tissue breaks down into its constituent components, one of the breakdown products is a ketone, and ketones can be used as fuel in the body, all right? And so once you start running off of ketones, well, then you're eating a ketogenic diet. There are a couple different ways to get into ketosis. Ketosis is the term for when you have ketones in your bloodstream. And one way is starvation. Okay, if you're not eating anything, you're not getting any glucose, any carbohydrate, any sugar in, your body eventually runs through its own stores, and glucose, carbohydrates broken down to glucose, stored as glycogen in the liver or glycogen in the muscle. Once you go through all those stores, well, then you're left to breaking down your own fat, and so your ketone level starts rising. You also start breaking down protein at some point, so it's important to maintain your muscle mass while you're doing a ketogenic diet, and that's one of the things, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, that differentiates a well-designed ketogenic diet versus other ketogenic diets, okay? So starvation is one way to do it. I wouldn't do it that way. Some diabetes can do it also, usually type 1 diabetes, and it gets into malnutrition. You have all this glucose in your system, which is different than starvation, ketosis, but you have all this glucose, blood sugar, all this glucose or sugar in your bloodstream, but your body can't utilize it. So it's there, but your body acts as if it's not, and so you start getting ketones, breakdown products from fat, okay? And you're very sick if that happens. That's where a lot of doctors, a lot of healthcare professionals get confused because we are trained so well to treat diabetic ketoacidosis as a medical emergency, okay? So in that situation, when you're so tremendously sick, the ketone level's so high, your body can't handle it, and you start getting acid, too much acid in your blood. So you get this acid-based disorder. And that's terribly bad news. You're in the intensive care unit, that's bad news. A ketogenic diet, your ketone level rises a little bit above normal, but your body's so good at controlling your acid-base balance with nutritional ketosis that you never get outside the normal as far as pH, acid and base, right? So you're in ketosis, you are not in ketoacidosis. Very different. You know, a lot of people say, don't do a ketogenic diet, it'll put too much acid in your body. Okay, that just doesn't seem true at all. Two very distinct situations, okay? So how do you start using ketones? Well, one way is intermittent fasting, okay? If you fast long enough, and intermittent fasting, I had a different talk on that. Intermittent fasting simply means you go a prescribed period without taking any calories, and then you eat over a particular window of time, okay? All sorts of different protocols for that, and not all intermittent fasting will get you into ketosis, but some protocols will, okay? So that's a little bit different topic, but that's one way to do it. The other way is just don't eat any carbohydrates. Seems simple enough, right? So you know you're doing a ketogenic diet if you're running off ketones. How do you know if you're running off of ketones? If you're eating so few carbohydrates that your body has to break down fat and it can't use glucose as a primary energy source because you're not eating carbohydrates to fuel that glucose. That makes sense? Raise your hand if it doesn't make sense. We'll talk later. Okay, so how much carbohydrates are you allowed? Everyone's a little bit different. General consensus is 20 to 50 grams of net carbs, and we'll talk about net carbs in a minute here. So it's not very much. You know, bananas got maybe 30 grams, so for some people, one banana in a day is too much, Okay, so you got to pay attention. Other thing you can do if you're really particular about things, really scientific, is you can buy urine dipsticks and test your urine, ketone strips. So they'll turn a color, and you read the directions on the package. It'll tell you, are you making ketones or not? There's some caveats or specifics about that. For example, the longer you're in ketosis, sometimes the strips change less than they would when you're first. Anyway, some other complications complicated facts with that, but that's one way to test. There are blood tests that do it too, but those, generally you have to see a physician and have them ordered and that sort of thing. So there are finger poke tests that you can buy those machines at the drugstore. Anyway, this is getting into some of the weeds here, but the main thing is for most people, if you're between 20 and 50 grams of net carbs, you're going to be running off of ketones. Okay, so when I mention net carbs, that's an important distinction or important point. So let's say you have let's say a fiber supplement. Okay, fiber is tremendously important. I got another talk about that. So you got your black coffee in the morning, you pour your inulin powder in there, and it says something like 3 grams of carbohydrate. You're like, oh, I gotta subtract 3 from my total daily allotment. Well, then you look on the label a little bit further and it says fiber, 3 grams. Well, guess what? You can cancel that out. Okay, so net carbs is all the carbs you take in a day minus the fiber. Few other things you can subtract, but that is not all that common. So fiber is the primary thing. And the reason for that, on nutrition labels, fiber counts as a carbohydrate in that total number, but fiber doesn't affect your insulin level, which is what we're talking about here, and blood sugar levels, okay? And fiber is actually tremendously important, so get your between 20 and 30 grams of fiber a day, okay? So your net carbs between 20 and 50. And I should pause here for a moment. There are absolutely some medical conditions where you should not do a ketogenic diet, so make sure you talk with your physician if you're thinking about it, or whoever your healthcare fitness nutrition person is, just to get some personalized advice, okay? So that's it. I mean, if you're doing 20 to 50 net carbs a day, you should be in ketosis, all right? Yeah, you're off and running. Now, what's a well-designed ketogenic diet? That's a little bit different story, okay? So one thing is keeping the carbohydrates low. Those 20 to 50 should come exclusively from nuts, seeds, vegetables, and fiber supplements, okay? Vegetables, tremendously important because you want to get the fiber and the nutrients, okay? So that's very important. Make sure all 20 to 50 grams net carbohydrates, vegetables, fiber supplement, and there was one other thing I just said that I can't remember right now. Vegetables, nuts and seeds. Thank you for reminding me. So get it all from there, okay? Then what are you gonna eat? Because that's not a whole lot of calories. You still need to get enough calories, okay? And so fat's gonna make up the rest of a lot of the rest of it. That's gonna be the most variable. The protein is gonna be fairly fixed. So you want about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Okay. Now, sometimes if you have a lot of extra adipose tissue, a lot of extra fat, that protein number is going to look very high. Ideally, we use your lean body mass, so just how much do you weigh without the fat component, and we want 1 gram of protein for that weight. So for a lot of people, most people, it's somewhere 80 to 100 grams of protein per day. Okay, and people are getting their protein from Greek yogurts, watch the carb count, nuts and seeds, watch the carb count, and meat. That's where most people get their proteins from. Eggs also, those things, okay? So the protein's fixed, the carbohydrates are fixed, the fiber component is fixed, and then you have the fat. So that's gonna make up the difference. Now, a lot of ketogenic people will tell you, eat as much fat as you want, saturated fat is fine. That's old school thinking, that's gonna give you a heart attack. Still a little controversial, okay? I'm gonna get some heat for saying this, okay? The other fats I think are fine. The healthy fats, the monounsaturated, polyunsaturated. I'm talking about, any picture you see when you do an internet search for ketogenic foods. This is avocado, olives, olive oil, avocado oil, fishes. Let me say that again, fish. In all sorts of different varieties. So those are all the healthy fats, okay? Nuts and seeds also, like I mentioned a few times, all right? I get a little nervous yet about the saturated fat, okay? I think things may shake out where the saturated fats are okay, but there's clearly this population of people, somewhere around 5%, where if they go on a ketogenic diet, their bad cholesterol, LDL, goes through the roof, okay? Now, it typically is in younger, I don't know, 20, 30-year-old lean people to begin with who are doing this. That's typically who it is. That's kind of the textbook picture. And in that population, they're usually very active. They're getting plenty of nutrients. Is this elevated cholesterol a problem? All right. It might turn out that it's not, that they're processing things differently. But as of right now, we just don't know. And so I tend to play it a little bit more conservatively and say limit your saturated fat to between 7 to 10% of your total daily calories, and then don't go overboard on it. All right, so coconut oil is hip and trendy, right? So again, I think, and my guess is going to turn out being okay. We just don't have enough evidence to say it's okay at this point. MCT oil is another one that people constantly, frequently use on a ketogenic diet. So the other fats, fine, go crazy, go nuts. Get it. But the saturated fat, still be careful with. There's plenty of evidence in the cardiovascular literature. The American Heart Association presidential report went into great detail, all these just massive studies about saturated fat and cardiovascular disease. Now, what does seem to be clear, I think has already been pretty well established, is the healthy fats that I mentioned are preferable to the saturated fat, okay? Lots of studies show saturated fat in general leads to unchanged cardiovascular risk, okay? Whereas if you're eating a bunch of saturated fat and you change it out for those healthy fats that I mentioned, it's actually gonna help your cardiovascular risk factors. So it's a little bit to play around with, but that's a very important part with the ketogenic diet, and one reason or one point that a lot of people, internet folks, commentaries, physicians, dietitians disagree on, okay? So that's a well-designed ketogenic diet, all right? Poorly designed, again, at this point, from my perspective and all the evidence that is out there, I think that overdoing the saturated fat may be detrimental. Okay, so focus on the healthy fats. You don't have to eliminate saturated fat, but focus on the healthy fats that I listed, and then get enough nutrients. Okay, if you're eating nothing but bacon and eggs, I think that's a problem. All right, you're not getting enough nutrients from that stuff. I think a lot of the concern that people do have about the ketogenic diet is misinformed and inaccurate. So in general, I'm a fan of it with those few caveats that I discussed throughout this video. So this was just a brief, 10-minute talk about the ketogenic diet. We could talk for, weeks on end about all the intricacies of it. But this is just a place to get you started, my perspective. And thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Be sure to schedule your free 30-minute initial phone consultation by sending me an email or by visiting our website at refinedwellnessconsulting.com.